Hello, the One Integral here, and welcome to the introduction video to my shiny hunting guide for Pokemon X and Pokemon Y. In this small series of guides, I will be telling you everything you need to know about shinies and how to obtain them in the Kalos region. We start off with this introduction video, in which I will be outlining the concept of shiny Pokemon and what they are, as well as some of the technical side behind how rare they are. Later episodes will see me explain several different methods for hunting shiny Pokemon, one per episode, as well as analysing the different advantages and disadvantages of each, combined with their efficiency and my recommendations on how best to prepare and orchestrate your hunt. But for today, we will be looking at shiny Pokemon in general. Now, chances are you know what shiny Pokemon are, but for those who are unfamiliar with the term, I'm going to give a brief explanation. Shiny Pokemon, or differently coloured Pokemon, which they are commonly referred to as in the games, are simply Pokemon with a different colour scheme. This difference could be large and noticeable, like in the case of Gyarados, which goes from a deep blue to a dazzling red colour, or very subtle, like with Garchomp, whose colour hardly changes at all. There are no other differences between shiny Pokemon and normal Pokemon. There are no differences in stats, or movesets, or anything of the nature. Fortunately, there is another way to distinguish a shiny from a normal Pokemon. When they are sent out into battle, they give off a sparkling sound effect and animation, which is very easy to notice. So now we have the definition out of the way, let's move on to looking at how exactly the game determines whether a Pokemon will be shiny or not. Starting in Generation 3 and carrying up to at least Generation 5, I shall be mentioning the possible changes in Generation 6 a bit later on. Anyway, from Generation 3 to at least Generation 5, a Pokemon's shininess is dependent on 3 variables. These are your trainer ID number, your secret ID number, and the Pokemon's personality value. For those who don't know, your trainer ID number is the one on your trainer card, and your secret ID number is a second 5-digit number assigned to each player, which is hidden from view and cannot be seen without the use of cheating devices. This ID is generally used so if a trainer has the same name and the same ID as a different trainer, but they have, exactly the same ID and same name, if the secret ID wasn't there, then when the Pokemon was traded across, they would act as if that person owned the Pokemon. It wasn't a traded Pokemon, it would act as like that. Whereas a secret ID number is very unlikely for your two trainers to have the same name, the same trainer ID, and the same secret ID. So it's just sort of another way to sort of secure the fact that it can't break via the trading method. Anyway, thirdly, a Pokemon's personality value is an unsigned, meaning that it can only be positive, 32-bit integer. This is created when a Pokemon is first encountered in the wild, received from, a person or an NPC, or under the egg given by the daycare man. So, we know what 3 values are used to determine whether a Pokemon is shiny or not, but how does the game use these values to determine that very fact? Well, here's where it gets a bit technical. To start off, you need to know what an exclusive OR, which is commonly shortened to XOR, operation is. An exclusive OR operation, in terms of binary, which is what the game works in, compares each digit, and if they are different, produces an output of 1. If the values are the same, the output is 0. For example, and here I'm going to use shorter values just for convenience, let's say the 2 values we have are 1001 and 1100, or 1001, 1100. We're going to XOR these values together. Starting off looking at the first digit of each, we can see on the first value it is 1, and on the second value it's also a 1. Since these are equal, we get an output of 0. Comparing the second digits, we see they are different, giving us an output of 1. We can continue doing this for the rest of the digits, eventually giving us 0101. Hopefully I've explained it clearly enough for you all to understand. Anyway, what is first done is the values for the trainer ID and the secret ID are XORed together. If you want to show this symbolically, where the trainer ID is denoted by T and the secret ID by S, we can say T XOR S equals X, which is our newly calculated value. Next up, we take a look at the Pokemon's personality value. We can split this 32-bit integer into 2 sections, each of 16-digit length. We then need to take these sections and, like we did with the 2 IDs, XOR them together. Or in symbol notation, where the first 16-digit section is represented by A and the second section by B, we can say A XOR B equals Y, which is our new value. Then, once we have the values for X and Y, we can calculate our final value that we need, which I shall denote by Z. To do this, much like before, we need to XOR X and Y together, so we can say X XOR Y equals Z. So now we have the value we need. What do we do with this value, you ask? Well, we examine it, and if this value is less than 8, we have ourselves a shiny Pokemon. Let's illustrate this whole process with an example. We shall first make up some values for the trainer ID, secret ID and personality value. Let's say the trainer ID number is 12345 and the secret ID number is 50000 and the personality value is, well, I'm not going to read this one out, but I'll put it on screen for you guys. So we have our three values. Now if you notice, the trainer ID and secret ID aren't in the correct form at the moment. We need to convert them into binary. I won't go into how to convert numbers between decimal and binary, I'll just process them through. On screen you'll be able to see the values now, I'm not going to read them out. Okay, so we have the values we need now. First off, we need to do T, X or S to obtain X, which calculates out to be the value on screen. Again, I'm not going to read it out because it would get quite annoying. Then we do the calculation to obtain Y from A and B. This gives us, again, the value on screen. Finally, we can XOR X and Y together to obtain Z, which is, again, shown on the screen. We then need to convert this binary value to a decimal one, and doing that gives us Z equal to 31,211. Unfortunately, this value is not less than 8, so we do not have a shiny in this case. The final value Z can be any integer from 0 to 65,536, which works out at a probability of 8 in 65,536 being shiny, which simplifies down to 1 in 8,192. So for every 8,192 Pokemon you encounter, just one will be shiny. So as you can tell, shiny Pokemon are quite rare. Now saying this, there have been many reports in Pokemon X and Y that shinies have gotten more common. However, we're not sure yet if this is an actual change in the game or whether it's just the fact that there has been more exposure on the internet of the games and people, finding shinies and posting pictures and such like that. There have been many reports of how the shiny rate might have been changed. Some people saying it's 1 out of every 1,000 now instead of 8,192. Some people saying the rate increases the longer you spend on a route. And some even saying that the tipping you can do throughout the story and the game itself, for example at restaurants, at Parfum Palace where you can tip people if they sing you a song, stuff like that. Some people say that tipping them increases the shiny odds, but we have no clarification or anything of the sort on whether it actually affects shiny rate as yet. I can't report on that quite yet because it's not been confirmed or even tested out by people. So obviously if the information comes to light in the future, I will update this video with another one and I'll be telling you guys exactly how or if the shiny rate has been changed in X and Y. The main way I think it will be able to work is they will basically, instead of saying it has to be less than 8, they could say it's less than 100, which would increase the chances quite considerably. So that's probably how they would do it. If you've been on the route for half an hour, the rate then goes down to 2 out of every 500, and that's really, really high rate. But you get what I mean there, guys. Something like that, and obviously the tipping would do the same thing. It might reduce the rate to, it could be less than 16 for, another 24 hours. I'm guessing the tipping would be, a timed event rather than a permanent event, and yeah, stuff like that. So obviously if it's been changed to example 1 in every 1,000, then it would be if it's less than 800 rather than, less than 8. So yeah, it could be anything along those lines. I'm not giving exact values here, so yeah, I will be updating it in future installments of this sort of series. Anyway, thankfully there are some methods you can follow to increasing your chances of obtaining a shiny Pokemon, and there are now more methods than ever in Pokemon X and Y, and I'll move on to covering each and every one of them in future installments of this series. So all that remains to be said in this episode is thank you for watching, and I hope you found this video very informative. Goodbye, guys.